Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Robert Martin. I'm a sociology professor at Southeastern, and this is another episode of our podcast, Sociology Unmasked, that we're doing here in the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice. We're doing these with all different hosts. So if you saw the last one, there was a different host than me. Depending on when we air this one, there might be multiple different hosts than me. But in this one, I'm going to be your host. We're going to have at least one sociology or criminal justice professor from the department hosting the shows. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to give you a chance to hear from some of the members of our chapter of the Alpha Kappa Delta Honor Society. So in our department, we have a chapter of, it's a National Sociology Honor Society. We've had this since 2014. So we've had an organization that's both an honor society on campus, and it's also a chapter of the National Sociology Honor Society, which is called Alpha Kappa Delta. If you're interested in being a part of the honor society here, I'm the faculty advisor for it. And folks can join if you meet a few different criteria. So if you're an undergrad student right now, in order to qualify for the honor society, you will have had to take 4 sociology classes that have like SOC in their like course name, and have gotten at least a 3.0 GPA in those social classes. You also have to have an overall GPA of 3.3 and up, and you have to be at least a junior or a senior. So pretty much if you meet those criteria, you are eligible to join. If you're a graduate student, there's some grad students here in our department. If you're a grad student in the department, you're eligible if you've got 3.0 GPA or more, and if you've taken at least 6 credits of classes. So if that's you, and if you're interested, drop me a line. My email address is romartin, so it's ROMARTIN @southeastern.edu. I'd be interested. I'd love to tell you more about it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit with some other members of Alpha Kappa Delta to hear some more about what their experience has been being in the Honor Society and some of the stuff they've worked on. We've done a lot of cool stuff over the last few years. And so now what I want to do is I want to give a chance to have the other folks that are on the podcast introduce themselves. We have 4 current members of AKD who are here. So we're going to go around and everybody's going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sam Allen, they, them pronouns. I am a graduate student at Southeastern with a focus on sustainability and globalization.
Hi guys, I'm Tiffany Bel. I'm a grad student. I work at Sims Memorial Library, and I'm interested in working with juveniles and juvenile delinquency.
Hey, this is Jacob O'Neill, a graduate student in the Applied Sociology program.
Hello, my name is Darren Quiett. I'm a current graduate student at Southeastern in applied sociology.
Cool. Well, thank y'all for introducing yourselves. We have a lot of grad students here on the episode today, but we've got a bunch of folks in Alpha Kappa Delta who aren't grad students. And in fact, I think at least a couple of the people that are with us today signed up as undergrads and then continued on in AKD while they're grad students too. So even though we got a lot of grad students here, we got a bunch of undergrads too that are involved in the organization. So I want to throw it open to everybody who's here, and I want to talk a little bit about just the organization, how folks got interested in it, and also kind of like what it's been like being in Alpha Kappa Delta in these really kind of unprecedented pandemic times. I mean, what we've been doing for the last since spring 2020 is we've been having all these like virtual meetings, and we actually haven't all the five of us been in the same room since, I don't know, February of 2020. But we've been in a lot of the same virtual rooms together. So I want to throw it open to anybody who wants to answer. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you became just interested in Alpha Kappa Delta first off? Like, what got you interested in wanting to be a part of the Honor Society?
Well, I'll start off. Well, Tiffany kind of got me introduced into it. She told me about it. Um, that's kind of what interested me. And plus, I'm kind of came from the criminal justice side of things. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about sociology and kind of explore that side of my degree. That's what interested me.
I was interested to connect like with my fellow graduate students, and it was COVID, so I couldn't really do anything in person or be friends in person. So doing virtual club meetings and just having an organization to share common goals and likes was an interest to me.
I got interested because I wanted to explore like the way research is done and take a more like active and applied role in applying what we're studying in class and stuff. So AKD gave me a way to actually physically do something with what I was learning.
So I knew that AKT was a prestigious organization in the department. Uh, and I guess I get that opinion because in my undergraduate, I kind of messed around with my GPA and uh, wasn't able to access the honor society at that point in time. So I always kind of had a curiosity about what the students do there and what I could do if I was a part of it. So when I got the opportunity, I took it.
Awesome. And I want to mention too that a lot of the folks that are here today are actually like currently officers in Alpha Kappa Delta. So it's like a registered, recognized student organization on campus. It meets all the requirements for that. We're always real careful about that. And I know Jacob right now has been serving as the president. Tiffany is been serving as secretary. Sam has been serving as treasurer. Michael Ann Leachman is our vice president. We're actually going to be looking for new officers at the end of the calendar year. So if anybody's listening to this podcast who's in AKD, definitely let me know if you want to be an officer, in addition to y'all that are right here. Although I know some of you are wrapping up your degrees right now, so I wouldn't make you do that. Well, awesome. So as I mentioned, Alpha Kappa Delta has been going since 2014, so several years now. It's been through a variety of iterations. And one of the things it's been interesting to me, I've been the advisor since the beginning of the organization. And we've had these kind of waves of students come in, and every time we've had a different wave of student come in, or of students come in, the organization has had a different kind of interest and concentration in things that folks were interested in. So to give you all an idea of some of the stuff Alpha Kappa Delta has done in the past, before y'all that are on this episode now were involved in it, there was 1 year where they were very involved in different kinds of charity work. Like a bunch of folks were volunteering at an organization called Louisiana Books for Prisoners, which was something that was it's a volunteer organization that does just what's in the title. They send books to folks that are incarcerated. And so folks were volunteering with that. There's been different food drives, especially and toy drives and stuff after some of the various disasters that we've had down here. Alpha Kappa Delta in the past has really stepped up and done a whole bunch of other things. The current version of AKD in terms of who's in it now has actually been one of the most active since I've been involved, which is why I'm especially glad that a lot of you that are here have been involved in those initiatives. Before we start talking about that, though, I'm curious about what it's been for y'all being involved in student organizations like this one and in general, like during the pandemic? I mean, I know a lot of you, I think maybe even all of you were involved in AKD before, spring 2020. So I wondered if you might be able to talk a little bit about what it's been like being in a student organization like this in the midst of a pandemic like the coronavirus pandemic, and maybe how it's differed from your student experience as members of student organizations before this sort of thing.
Well, the only other organization that I've been in besides this one pre-pandemic was pre-law. Um, it was very active whenever I was in pre-law. We were always planning things or doing things to like prep for an LSAT prep test or something like that. Whereas now, with my experience with AKD and it being virtual, it's communication is definitely kind of different. Everything's via email, or you have to get out everything you're going to say in 1 hour of a virtual meeting. Um, so it's kind of a challenge, and a bit of an adjustment. Whereas I feel I'm more of someone who likes to interact in person and, socializing in person rather than via, on the phone or something. Um, yeah, so that's the only difference for me. It's hard to communication is kind of a little harder.
I've found that it's actually easier to get to attend meetings and get in touch with everybody since we started doing everything virtually, because the big problem that we had pre-pandemic was that our meeting schedule it didn't quite fit with everybody's personal class schedules and everything. So I found it tends to be easier for us to meet because I don't have to be running between classes or between work and everything to actually attend a meeting. I can just pull out my phone or my computer and attend wherever I am. But some to leap off of something that Darren said, we have to get everything that we're going to say into 1 hour or a little bit more than an hour sometimes. But it also means that we tend to be focused on whatever we're doing. We tend to be streamlined. And something that I got frustrated with organizations that I was with in the past was that the meetings would hypothetically be an hour, but we'd sometimes go a lot longer than that. And the meetings could sometimes get super off topic because there was no hard and fast, we need to be out by this time. And that's something that I'm pretty glad about coming to pass because we're having to be virtual. Is we tend to be more focused and on topic during meetings.
I definitely agree with Darren that communication is tougher. Because you can't really read the room when you're virtual and it's harder. But I agree with Sam because it is more convenient, to try to get somewhere that is an hour away from home just for a meeting. So definitely meeting virtual has opened up a new world of opportunity that people can meet that weren't able to meet before and organize and do things that they couldn't do before. So it is really good that we learned to do this virtually. Probably it will stay around a little bit longer than maybe any of us expected.
Yeah, I kind of see the adaptation we made to 100% online as sort of tapping into an unnoticed potential that we had. It really has allowed us to thrive. We did a ton of work online, and just our ability to say attend a conference online in the same way that we had collected our data online and all the rest really speaks to the potential we have as students, using these virtual means. So
Yeah, for sure. And what what Jacob was mentioning there in terms of like collecting data and going to a conference, we're going to talk more about that. But one of the things that Alpha Kappa Delta did over the course of this year, and especially like fall 2020 and spring 2021, is they actually managed to do an entire research project from beginning to end in terms of getting it together, organizing it, surveying students at Southeastern, and then presenting their results at a professional sociological conference in the spring. So we'll talk more about that in a little while. Before we do that, though, one last question that I have kind of on the same vein. I mean, y'all are social science students. Do you feel like what kind of lessons do you feel like you've learned from being a student during a pandemic? Like, is there anything that you feel like you have really especially taken away from that experience, specifically as folks studying things related to sociology?
Well, it's certainly given like a firsthand example of some of the concepts that we were studying in class, like how with the economy being what it is, especially after the pandemic started, we of course had the spike in homelessness and people getting fired from work, and at the same time, I was doing another project with one of the other professors about that, and like it just it made everything a little less theoretical and made it be like, oh no, this is stuff that's actually in affecting everybody's lives and affecting people that I know, and here's why that is everything that it is. And the increased like prevalence of mutual aid groups and things like that have they've shown how like the gaps in our society and the way that everything that we study in class impacts like your average everyday people. So it's just it's been a lesson in and of itself.
Awesome. All right. Well, then the next thing that we can talk a little bit about is, like I mentioned, Alpha Kappa Delta last year and into this year did an entire research project. And it was a project on the study of food insecurity among students at Southeastern. It's something which was in the works for quite some time. Students in Alpha Kappa Delta were planning this out for at least a year and a half, I guess, up to the point of actually like conducting a survey and analyzing data and stuff. So I wanted to, a lot of the folks that are in this episode were involved at all different stages of getting this together. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to give y'all a bit of an opportunity to talk about what this project was, like what the research question was, how it came about, and just like in general, how y'all got interested in studying the specific topic of food insecurity. And also just like what food insecurity is, because I think some of our listeners might not know.
I know that like food insecurity was important to me because I thought like about like kids on campus or even younger kids at school not having access to like prepared meals for school lunches and stuff. And so then you're at home and it was hard to get to the grocery store and it was hard to afford groceries if you weren't working. So it was a really big issue that seemed important to me.
I know that from personal experience, knowing other students, and not to speak for Michael Ann, even though she's not here, but she spearheaded a lot about the forming of the research question and just the curiosity of the prevalence of food insecurity on campus. What do those numbers look like? And who are those students? Not necessarily their you know, specific identity, but who are those students who are food insecure? Are they international students? Are they athletes? Is it involved with race? We found it to be something that wasn't really spoken about despite the existence of a food pantry or food assistance program on campus.
For sure. And I want to definitely give a lot of credit to Michael Ann Leachman, who's not here. Michael Ann has been very much involved in the development of this project at all different stages. One of the main drivers of making it happen. So I give Michael Ann a lot of credit. So I know for a lot of you, this might have been either the first time you were involved in a research project, or certainly like collecting new information and new data. And for some of you, it might be that if you have been involved in one, maybe it's been one of the bigger ones you've been involved in. So I wanted to ask, for folks listening, if you could tell us a little bit about what the project was, like what you actually were trying to find out, and how you went about doing it. Like what were like the nuts and bolts of this project all about, like in terms of how it happened, like what it was.
I guess like Jacob said, to try to figure out if there were certain students that were more food insecure than others. I know another concern was like having access to be able to cook your food, like how were you going to store your food? So there's a lot of kids that live in dorms on campus. Were they utilizing the food bank? Were they utilizing food banks in the community? And did they know about things like that? So if they, you know, knew those things were available to them and if they were able to get to it. But then if they got like food that they needed to cook, then how would they cook it?
It's funny. The the origin of this project is, uh, in my memory, there were several students who attended a meeting and decided on food insecurity as the research interest, uh, and I just ran with that, for my part. Um, I know we were interested in, access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. Uh, you know, that's what we defined as food insecurity, is if you're not accessing insufficient or sufficient food, if you're not accessing safe food or nutritious food, that you know, objectively you are food insecure, regardless of whether or not you see yourself that way.
I know it start for me, coming to this research project. I didn't know what food insecurity was. I kind of entered whenever we already established a topic. Um, so I didn't really have much say so in like the topic or what we're gonna research. Um, but I mean, doing this conference compared to the other conferences that I've done in grad school, this one was a little more intimidating because it was on a bigger platform. It was on a bigger scale. So I really didn't. I had, a little bit of an idea on how to, collect data and do that kind of thing and all, and working with SPSS and everything and doing and even presenting it. But this time it was just a little bit more nerve-wracking um, doing it this time, and then with the topic that I'm not as familiar with. Um, but I mean, it was still fun. It was great collaborating with other grad students and other students as well. So.
I'd like to. Oh, I definitely would like to add though. You know, we're talking about it from a very uh, intellectual standpoint, but we were very interested in how we could contribute to the well-being of our university students, to students just like us, uh, who are going through, life that food insecurity very, very well may be a part of their life. So we're interested in somehow, uh, giving back to them by understanding, uh, you know, the demographic situation at our university. And then from there, the whole goal was to think about ways of addressing what may or may not have been a problem within the student population.
Yeah, definitely. So just to give listeners a little more of an idea of what this project was all about and what it entailed, back in I guess fall of 2020, I want to say, Alpha Kappa Delta met online like this in pretty much a weekly basis to develop a survey that was about, I think it wound up coming in at about like 20, 25 questions, something like that, with a whole lot of people were involved in it in Alpha Kappa Delta, a lot of students, undergrad and grad. We would meet in Google Meet like this and go over a whole variety of things that people had ideas about. Some of the questions were drawing on existing series of questions on food insecurity that other reputable organizations had come up with and used as surveys. And other questions were brand new ones that folks in AKD were especially interested in understanding and getting the answers to. Then after that, after the questions in the survey was approved by the university's institutional review board, the IRB, that makes sure that research having to do with human subjects is done ethically. After that, in spring of 2021, at the start of that semester, the AD students gave the survey to students in a whole bunch of Sociology 101 classes. And the result was that I think somewhere about, I want to say maybe about like 75 and this 75, 80 students answered it. Some of the responses had to get, removed for one reason or another. But the final survey's response was, I think, about like 70 students that folks got responses from. From there, the students in AD analyzed the data using a statistics software program called SPSS, which is something that in the department we teach y'all to use, both in undergrad and grad level. And then what folks did with that, with the results of doing all this analysis on food insecurity, was they took their results to a conference, professional sociological research conference that gets held every year. There's a lot of organizations, like big sociological professional organizations like the American Sociological Association and various other regional associations. And what the AKD students did was they went to a meeting of the Southern Sociological Society, which meets every year, and presented their findings in a regular research presentation with other researchers in the field doing all kinds of interesting work. So the end result of all this is that this research done by students was then presented by students at a professional conference, which is a really great opportunity that I'm glad that the folks in AKD were able to make happen. So I want to talk a little bit about what the experience of like doing the study was like, what the process was like in terms of like developing the questions, analyzing the data, and then for folks that helped give the conference presentation, what that was like too. So let's talk a little bit about the process of actually like collecting the data and putting the survey together. Like, what was that experience like for people? Was that more involved than you thought, or easier than you thought, or how did it compare to your kind of expectations for something like this going in?
So I think it was a big collaborative effort. It wasn't hard. I and before I thought that it would be more formal, very, I don't know, I just had a idea that it would be harder than what I expected. But it was very easy, coming up with the questions, and then even putting everything in SPSS. Um, it wasn't as much of a challenge as I thought it would be. But that's probably because I had a bunch of other grad students to help me do it. Whereas with other research conferences, I had to do it on my own. So yeah, it was very fun.
I agree with Darren. It was fun. I really liked that we got to like take all the stuff we learned in class and like apply it to real life and like do real research. So it was exciting to learn how to do that like in the real world. And everybody worked really well together and we were functioning as a group and it wasn't as hard. So it was a really pleasant experience.
And I think one of the harder things was really just once we had that bank of questions, just wheedling them down until we had like a solid question base, and then figuring out how we were going to like we used Google Forms, I believe, and we trying to figure out how we're going to format the questions to get the most out of what we had. And honestly, that was the hardest part, but coming up with them and then putting everything through SPSS and really looking at the data and finding out what we had, that was all. It was all so interesting, and it didn't quite get the results that I expected, but it's still fascinating nonetheless.
I'll definitely say it was difficult to have, even 3 or 4, different opinions, just trying to work out, um, something that we can all agree with and believe that's covering all the interests there. So definitely much more difficult than I had thought it would be. There's more time consuming. Sure, we came up with questions quickly, but the wording of the questions I remember being painstaking uh, and worthwhile. And in the end, we got results that were definitely beyond my expectations as far as not necessarily statistical significance, but uh, knowing how respondents do respond to survey questions, especially things like direct questions such as, do you identify as food insecure? I mean, uh, it was counterintuitive to think that that was maybe the wrong way to go about it, that the objective measures uh, were more clear than the subjective.
So as folks said, the process of coming up with the questions was really a process of sort of whittling them down. I mean, I think that at one point the survey was probably like about 50 questions long, and one thing that is definitely true about surveys is that you shouldn't make them too long, because after a while people start getting tired of doing the survey and they might not give as good answers as they might otherwise. So we were really trying to make sure that the survey was kind of crisp and concise and to the point and got at what folks in the organization really wanted to learn. So as was mentioned, the survey and the whole project was done online. The survey was not given in the physical classrooms. It was all done through Google Forms, which is a free through Google platform that lets you give surveys to people for them to fill out. And so all of these students in Sociology 101 were sent links to complete the surveys. Then they went on there and they filled them out. And folks in AKD were able to analyze them in a secure and confidential way. The students' names weren't identified or anything like that. It was entirely anonymous. So one of the things that Jacob alluded to, which was I think one of the more interesting findings, was the folks in AKD measured what it means to be food insecure in a variety of ways. There were a variety of like questions that were indicators measuring how often people say didn't eat 3 meals a day, questions like that. But then there were also questions where folks were asked directly, do you consider yourself food insecure? And there was a fairly big gap between what the two sets of questions like that produced as answers. And so I wonder if y'all could speak a little bit to what some of the findings were, both of the project in general, but also on that specific question. It's kind of interesting.
So I had no idea what food insecurity was. When I first started, I think I said that before. Um, so it was interesting looking up the the federal definitions compared to like the other definitions because there's so many, different definitions of what food insecurity is. Um, so yeah, it was interesting looking at what other people thought about the definition of what food insecurity was, and discovering if they were food insecure themselves was, yeah, it was very interesting.
So, so not many people actually identified, specifically identified as food insecure, but a much higher number did identify with factors that would make you insecure, such as skipping meals due to a lack of money. Um, skipping meals due to a lack of access to healthy foods, and that was compelling to find that, despite seeing that that same participant was saying no to the "Are you food insecure?" basically. So
I think it was like 3/4 of participants like said that they skipped meals or got like some sort of government assistance. Um, and I saw like another quarter, only a quarter said that they like didn't feel that they felt food insecure. So there was that huge gap, and we did have some questions to try and address, like, um, is it because you like are you like on a diet, or are you in some way not able to access like food that you're not like allergic to or have sensory issues with, or is it because like you rely on the campus food services, and for some reason it doesn't meet your needs? Like, we tried to address some of those um, possibilities, but overall the fact that there's like uh, a 20 something to 70 something gap is quite stark.
another thing I could mention is that despite us having some issues with statistical significance, uh, it was interesting to see that in Tangipahoa and our parish, there was a similar result of the prevalence of food insecurity, which I believe was like 16%, whereas like 20% of our findings, uh, participants were identifying as food insecure. So we're kind of around the parish number with our Soc 101 class sampling. That was very interesting as well.
Yeah, I know you were able to find some external numbers for Tangipahoa Parish in general, what percentage of people identified as food insecure. And it was a similar, as you said, it was a similar percentage of students in Southeastern who did. Um, yeah, there were a variety of questions that y'all asked about this. I see, for example, too, about 3/4 of people said that they lived in a place where it was convenient to buy healthy food, but a quarter, about 25% of folks didn't. Um, about a little over a half of the sample, about 55% of everybody who took the survey said that they um, at least once a month feel hungry right after eating, which was another objective food insecurity measure that folks use. Like, so the idea there is you can eat, but are you getting enough food? And a fairly sizable percentage of people at least once a month, and even up to once a week, said that they didn't. The like percentage of people that said that they still feel hungry right after they eat, at least on a weekly basis, was over 40% of everybody who took the survey, so it was pretty high. So all kinds of interesting findings. Um, one other thing that came up, one of the questions drilled down even further into why people skip meals, because a lot of people identified skipping meals. As Sam said, it was about 3/4 of everybody skips at least a meal once a month in the sample. Um, And so there were a variety of questions that the survey asked about why that is. And a pretty sizable percentage of people said lack of money. That was about like a third of everybody. Lack of access to healthy food. That was about 15%. 35% of people said that they didn't like the food choices that were generally available to them. And then the biggest one was just not having enough time. So like about 60% of everybody says they skip a meal just because they don't have enough time. So a variety of really interesting findings, and a good sense, it gives you a good sense for kind of what students at Southeastern are experiencing. So as a faculty member too, it was really interesting seeing what y'all found. So as I mentioned before, the end result, the kind of final product of all this was that a number of AKD students presented these findings at the Southern Sociological Society's annual meeting. And that was interesting too. I was there for the presentation. I didn't give the presentation, but I was there to see it. One of the things that was really interesting and unique about it is that the presentation, much like the survey, was entirely online. So in 2021, the Southern Sociological Society annual meeting, which usually brings, I don't even know how many folks interested in sociology, hundreds, from all over the South and beyond the South, usually to some like physical location. Okay? And this year, because of COVID, that wasn't possible. So instead, what the organization did is they had an online meeting. So students from AKD were able to present their findings in this online setting, which is a really unique sort of experience. And so I know all three of the folks that presented that research are here on this episode. And so I wanted to ask y'all if you could talk a little bit about what that experience was like. What was it like presenting these research findings, not only at a professional conference with all these sociologists, but online, doing it through this online format? What was that like?
Well, as you guys can remember, I did not have such a good experience doing that because my camera decided to go out on me right before we were going to present. So that was very fun. And then it was so what made it worse is like if we were doing this big conference at this such a respected event, and that happened. So yeah, that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth as far as doing online um sort of anything. So yeah, that aspect I did not like, but other than that, it was okay.
But at the same time, we weren't the only ones having problems. I think even people within our what is it, like group of people who were presenting that day, multiple people had some really big problems. Like some at one point, you could only see her PowerPoint, but you couldn't see what she was saying. It was like the opposite problem with another person. And in other rooms that I attended that day, like some people just said, screw this, and moved over to Zoom because they didn't like the platform. But given that, I think the only reason it went as well as it did for us was because we practiced beforehand. Like, we practiced a lot beforehand. So we all had, like, were able to pick up. I think me and Darren ended up switching what we were presenting a little bit. So I did what he was going to do, and he picked up after he was able to rejoin. But like, it kind of took like the mystique of presenting at a conference away, because when you're seeing everybody else struggle with the same things that you're struggling with, it's like, oh yeah, everybody else here is just a dude who's also interested in the stuff I'm interested in. So, but yeah, it was fun, and overall, it wasn't any more it wasn't much more stressful than like presenting in class. As long as you've got your stuff together, you're fine. You're good.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the idea that there was a lot of technological issues with everyone who were there, not just us. It was clearly a challenge for the Southern Sociological Society and their ability to put that on with such a magnitude of participants. It's a very laggy, uh, you know, clicking on links and not even ever entering until 10 minutes later, whatever it may have been. Um, Luckily, we were tipped off of that fact, and we knew that we might have some issues with that. So we did our best to log into our room early and just be prepared for the worst. But from my personal perspective, it was very exciting. I love the idea that here was a real applied situation for what we discussed. A lot of what we did in this project, built on what we were taught in class, but it was very much an extracurricular project. So, you take something that you create yourself with others as an extracurricular activity, and then you go to the show with it. And if you're interested in the field, you know, by all means, if you're afraid of going to a conference, uh, do it as many times until you're no longer fearful, because that's a great learning experience.
What I always tell people too, when they're going to conferences, and if they feel apprehensive about sharing their research or whatever they found, the way I think about it is that if you go in there with the mindset that you are going to give people knowledge that they didn't have going in, it's like you're going to share new information that you have that they don't have. You're giving them something, literally. If you appreciate it, or if you come to it with that kind of generosity of spirit, I feel like that's something that can make the experience a little bit less intimidating than it might otherwise be. I thought it went really well. Did anybody who presented, or even if you didn't present, if you went to the event, did anybody go into any of the other sessions? Like, they were basically, the way that it works, if you're listening and you don't know about these types of things, is that at a professional conference, there's all these different people giving all these different research presentations in all these different rooms. And they're scheduled in these blocks of time, usually with maybe like 4 or 5 presentations per room, per block of time. So you can give your own presentation and you listen to the other people that are in the room with you. And then you can go to some of the other sessions and meet people, hear what they have to say, talk to them, share information. It's a little bit tougher, obviously, in that digital format, but did anybody else go to any of the other sessions?
I like early on in the week, I attended one that was like about gender and sexuality studies, and it was really interesting. But again, the technical problems kept inhibiting like what was going on. And I think SSS has they're working on it for next year in case it needs to be virtual again. So hopefully next year it won't be as bad.
Yeah, I'd add it was a remarkable amount of community, though. Everyone was very kind, very willing to be supportive about the mishaps going on the platform. It's definitely no knock on Southern Sociological Society or any of the participants there. It's very nice community.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people who came to the session that y'all presented in. I was glad to see that. I was sitting there too with my fingers crossed, hoping that the roof wasn't going to fall in technologically, and it didn't for you. I mean, other than that the one issue at the beginning with having to swap who presented in what order, it still worked out really well. So I was happy and very relieved to see that happen. And it's technology. It's got all kinds of advantages and disadvantages, as we're all very familiar with at this point. So I thought that was cool. So at this point, I want to start wrapping up, but I have a couple more questions that I want to throw out there. First off, what do you feel like you've gotten out of the experience of being in Alpha Kappa Delta, being in this organization, in an organization that's devoted to social science and research and service, and just sort of spreading word about social science and sociology? Like, what do you feel like you've gotten out of the experience of being in this student organization?
You know, I'd say no matter your role in the organization, you know, we had or still do a wonderful group of people uh, who really were ambitious, and with you, Dr. Martin, you know, you really gave us the opportunity to pursue our own interests and take the tools that we saw in front of us and try to make something out of our interests. And you know, I can't commend the group and you more for that. It's a very rounding experience for uh, the university experience. I, yeah, it was very rounding. Uh, Very grateful for it.
It was a
Um,
really good experience, and I feel like more confident because I know that some of like my classmates have like approached me and asked, did we want to do like a research project together? You know, maybe if we weren't affiliated even with an organization, or to be affiliated with an organization so that we could present at conferences and find out things we're interested in, you know, technically. Like it was legitimately, it was a good experience.
I really enjoyed the experience of actually doing the applying part of sociology. That's what I really loved about AKD. It really gave me the opportunity to really apply what we've learned for so long. Because I mean, it's like we can learn all this information and all these courses, but it's different once you get to, you know, actually apply it to something and something like food insecurity, and then see what the results were around your, you know, your community. So I really enjoyed that aspect and getting the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think uh, as Tiffany and Darren kind of touched on, I think a lot of students are really like hungry to be able to apply what they have, and I think this organization is a great way to be able to do that. But also, it almost everything that I did in part of this project, I took with me to do when I did my thesis, and it almost worked as like a practice round. Not really a practice because it was we were actually doing it, but like I'd never put in an IRB before. I'd never presented on a stage that big before. I'd never like properly analyzed a bunch of data with um, of this scale before, um, and it was so helpful because it wasn't just me doing it. It wasn't just me trying to figure it out. I had this uh, whole group of people to help me figure it out, and that I could help where they were lacking. And of course, Dr. Martin's guidance was immensely helpful. So it was a great way to learn and foster these skills that I took with me to my thesis. So yeah.
I'll add on to Sam's point. That also, I was definitely a lot of the things that we did. I was definitely able to apply it to my thesis as well. That's one thing that I was very grateful for. Just wanted to add that.
For sure. And it's definitely it's been great helping y'all out with this project and in general with these things that y'all have been working on. It's very gratifying to me to see, you know, what students can do when they put their minds to it. And put the work in too, because it was no little bit of effort to do all of this. Helped, of course, by everybody chipping in. So definitely very satisfying for me to see, and I appreciate what y'all said too. Um, Last question that I have for you all. Do you have any, I mean, a lot of you are fairly far along, getting close to graduation. It's not super far away for, I think, most of you here. So do you have any advice that you would give to an undergrad or even a grad student, things that you've learned in your experience along the way that you think have been most helpful to you or most informative to you that you would want to pass on to anybody?
Definitely to rely on your classmates for help. That's one thing. I mean, that's the only reason we were able to get through this research conference. Is relying on each other. I think um, Dr. Schrock would tell us that a lot to rely on our other fellow classmates, and that's something that I've learned we should really. That's a biggie in grad school. Definitely rely on your classmates.
Well, I'd add, you know, be all you can be. This experience is for you. Uh, you can make the most of, what's in front of you. And, there may be anxiety, there may be fear, you may have strangers in the room, but I mean, it's magic once you put yourself out there and start trying to pursue that interest and realize that your question is their question and your interest is their interest, and you can all make it happen together.
Building off of that, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, that even if it sounds kind of stupid in your head, like, don't be afraid to ask it, because I guarantee you somebody else in class has that answer or has that question, or somebody else in class has the answer to your question. So it's there's really no wrong way to learn how to do this. Rely on your classmates, rely on your professors. They're there for a reason. And just have fun with it, and take the opportunities as they're presented to you. Try and, like, build up your knowledge and diversify your knowledge a little bit, but also don't forget that, like, this is all fascinating and interesting stuff, and it's super fun to do. So.
Well, cool. Well, that's fantastic. What I want to do to close is I want to thank all of you who were all, on this episode with me. Darren, Sam, Tiffany, Jacob. Thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with everybody. I also wanted to let you know, if you're a listener and if this conversation has been interesting to you, as it's been interesting to me, feel free to reach out if you're at all interested in Alpha Kappa Delta, if you're interested in being part of the next project, whatever that might be, or if you're interested in graduate school in general. I mean, I know that the folks on this episode can speak to how useful that's been for them, and how I'm sure it's been a very interesting experience for them, I hope. So definitely reach out to myself or to Dr. Basilia or anybody else who's faculty in the department if grad school sounds like something that's interesting to you. We have our master's program in applied sociology. There's concentrations on the criminal justice side, on the sociology side, sustainability, globalization. We have all kinds of interesting things going on. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us. I hope it's been an interesting conversation, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one, everyone.